Today, another setback for American oil. An Obama-appointed judge reverses approval for an oil extraction in Alaska. Demand for industrial commodities like copper is falling. What does that tell us about the economic recovery? And Fidelity says Americans' retirement savings are at record high levels thanks to stock market highs and some people setting more money aside. That and much more coming up at NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. I'm Paul Graney. Wells Fargo is reversing course on a controversial decision to close personal lines of credit for customers. Last month, the bank announced it's closing those lines and advised customers to use other lending products instead. The bank admitted at the time closing the accounts could hurt owners' credit scores. So, angry customers began complaining on social media. Senator Elizabeth Warren also blasted the bank. Now, it's doing a 180. Says customers who've been using the lines of credit can continue to maintain them. Those who haven't borrowed against their lines of credit in the past 12 months have to call the bank or use their line of credit to maintain it. Other inactive accounts will be closed on December 2nd. And shares of stock trading app Robinhood slid 10% today after releasing its first quarterly earnings report as a public company. Robinhood's net revenue more than doubled from a year ago, but it expects retail investors to become less active in the next quarter, citing seasonal headwinds. That would obviously hurt revenue. Another area of concern, analysts say, is the hefty chunk of revenue that comes from investors trading often volatile cryptocurrencies. Trading Dogecoin, for example, it's a cryptocurrency that was created as a joke, accounts for 33% of its total transaction revenue. And chip maker Nvidia beat Wall Street expectations in the last quarter, but it also admitted that its acquisition of British company ARM may take longer than expected. NTD's Evelyn Lee with more.
Nvidia earnings beat Wall Street estimates Wednesday because of its strong graphics card sales. For the current quarter, the company forecasts $6.8 billion in revenue, beating Refinitiv's expectation of $6.5 billion. It's currently experiencing massive growth as semiconductor supply is running short worldwide. At the same time, demand for the processors that Nvidia specializes in is skyrocketing. Its revenue rose almost 70% annually during the quarter. Nvidia's graphics segment grew almost 90%. That's as graphics chips become increasingly important for different technologies, including gaming, AI, and cryptocurrency mining. But its cryptocurrency chip product, CMP, experienced lower sales. It was more than 30% lower than expected.
CMP revenue, which is recognized in OEM, was $266 million, lower than our original $400 million estimate, on reduced mining profitability, and we expect a minimal contribution from CMP going forward.
Last year, Nvidia also announced plans to buy British semiconductor firm ARM. Now the company admits that it may take longer than initially scheduled. But investors are paying close attention to whether the acquisition can withstand regulator scrutiny and close as promised.
We are confident in the deal, and that regulators should recognize the benefits of the acquisition to ARM, its licensees, and the industry.
Competitors like Qualcomm are opposed because they worry they might lose access to crucial technology. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And the Wall Street Journal reports that Amazon is planning to open large brick-and-mortar shops similar to but smaller than department stores. It's been experimenting with small physical stores selling items like books and groceries, but these new stores would be bigger, at around 30,000 square feet. The Journal reports some of its first stores will likely be in Ohio and California, and they'll sell products from top consumer brands. Amazon's been expanding its physical retail after gaining dominance in online shopping. Its biggest bet yet was buying Whole Foods in 2017. Meanwhile, as e-commerce booms, several big department store chains have gone bankrupt, like Sears, Neiman Marcus, and JCPenney. Some department stores are showing signs of life as people start going out again. Macy's and Kohl's shares both jumped today after posting strong results and future forecasts. We reached out to Amazon to confirm the plan, but haven't heard back yet. And Japanese automaker Toyota will cut global production for September by 40% from its previous plan. It's according to a Nikkei Business Daily report today, which says it's due to the worldwide shortage of semiconductors. This cut its production target almost in half, according to the report. Toyota is the world's largest automaker by sales volume. It said this month it was facing an unpredictable business environment, blaming fresh virus outbreaks, the semiconductor shortage, and soaring material prices. Toyota had no immediate response for comment, but American carmaker Ford also said today it'll stop production for a week at a plant in Kansas City, citing a chip-related part shortage. The plant makes its best-selling F-150 pickup truck. A major indexes closed mixed on Wall Street today after a pretty choppy day. A late rally in tech stocks helped offset some of the losses in energy companies, banks, and other sectors. The Dow fell 67 points, about 0.2%. S&P 500 gained 6 points, about 0.1%. And Nasdaq added 16 points, also about 0.1%. Oil dropped to $66 a barrel today. That's the lowest since May. Prices weighed down by concerns about weaker demand as cases of the Delta variant rise. The International Energy Agency last week trimmed its oil demand outlook, citing the spread of the new variant. OPEC, though, left its demand forecasts unchanged. The strong U.S. dollar is also adding to the pressure. It rallied versus the euro and other currencies recently. Strong dollar makes oil more expensive to other currency holders and tends to weigh on prices. Both Brent and U.S. crude have declined for 6 days in a row. Copper, too, it's also down over 16% from its May high. Experts worrying it's a sign we're facing a slowdown. Demand for industrial commodities like copper and iron ore can serve as an indicator of future economic activity. Ask money manager Daniel Akaye about it. He helps manage $6 billion in assets at the Tressis hedge fund.
Well, I think that there are a number of factors behind the weakness of commodities, and particularly copper and iron ore. The first one is obviously, as you very well pointed out, is that we have seen peak growth. We have seen most of the strongest part of the recovery behind us. And I think that in terms of the purchases of iron ore and copper, which are good bellwethers of industrial production, are signals that industrial production, that manufacturing in general is cooling down.
When we look at the PMIs month to month, even the recent ones, one of the big complaints, I think the major complaint is the labor shortage. And we have big clothing companies in America emailing their people, their customers, telling them there's labor shortages, not just in America, but seems to be across the globe. Is this a significant drag on growth and the recovery, do you feel?
Certainly, and particularly because it's artificially created. Basically, what we saw is that governments in developed economies, but also in emerging economies, have kept very strong subsidies to people to keep them out of the labor force, and it's taking more time than expected to bring them back into the labor force, because many of these subsidies were maintained for a longer period of time than was necessary. We have seen it, for example, in the European Union, where there are still 6 million furloughed jobs. We have seen it in the United States, where the stimulus checks were still there very recently. Therefore, there is, on the one hand, there is a very low labor participation rate because the services sector has not recovered as strongly as expected. But at the same time, there are labor shortages in the manufacturing sector because of these misguided subsidies, or at least maintaining them for a prolonged period of time, certainly longer than they were necessary.
And so what are your predictions for the next 12 to 24 months? And if stimulus plans aren't the answer, well, what do you recommend to policymakers when you speak with them?
Well, we had a discussion recently with Ms. Judy Shelton, in which both of us agreed that what policymakers have to do right now is to let the economy breathe, that stimulus plans are working against the recovery. because they're dragging on job creation, because they're dragging on improvement of productivity, because they're increasing debt on the sectors with overcapacity, while at the same time leaving the sectors of high productivity in a much weaker situation. So right now is exactly the moment for policymakers to let the economy breathe, to allow the economy to start rebuilding properly, because what they have ignored is that all of the productive capacity, the majority of the productive capacity of the global economy was completely untouched and during COVID-19. Therefore, the risk of creating a bubble while at the same time letting the economy drag is much worse than allowing the economy to simply work as it does with improvements in productivity and lower stimulus plans, which are fundamentally directed to bloating government spending, which means higher deficits, higher taxes, lower growth in the future.
Daniel Akai stresses. And Americans' retirement accounts are apparently swelling, according to the latest number from investment firm Fidelity. Fidelity is the largest provider of 401k savings plans in America. It says the average balances rose to almost $130,000 at the end of June. That's up 24% from the same time last year. IRA account balances also rose, averaging almost $135,000. That's 21% higher than a year ago. The higher balances are partly thanks to stock market highs. The report also says baby boomers and younger workers have increased their contributions to their retirement accounts. And fewer Americans are filing for unemployment benefits than at any time during the pandemic. The Commerce Department says new filings came in at 348,000 last week. While this is the lowest figure since last year's lockdowns, the number remains well above pre-pandemic average of around 220,000. Another encouraging sign, though, the number of people continuing to claim unemployment benefits has fallen to 2.8 million. This is also a pandemic-era low. Still, the labor market has a long ways to go before making a full recovery. It still has to recover over 7 million jobs. And a judge is telling Alaska's largest oil producer it can't go ahead with the project there. The project had approval from both the Trump and Biden administrations, but an Obama-appointed judge has now reversed the decision. NTD's Richards has more.
An oil project backed by both the Trump and Biden administrations has been blocked by a federal judge. Oil company ConocoPhillips was previously given the green light to drill in Alaska, with plans to spend $6 billion there.
The current and the previous administration, the regulators who do this for a living, thought that the project passed the environmental review process just fine. So she's actually, she's going against kind of the expert regulators.
In a 110-page ruling, Obama appointee Judge Sharon Gleason says the government didn't fully analyze foreign greenhouse gas emissions. She is also concerned the actions would harass polar bears. Regulations define harassment as an intentional or negligent act or omission, which creates the likelihood of injury to wildlife by annoying it.
We've seen through the environmental controls that we have in place, we've seen polar bear populations increasing in Alaska and throughout most of the North America. And also when you think about greenhouse gases, if we're restricting oil production in the U.S., it's going to happen somewhere else, perhaps in the Russian Arctic, where you're going to have more emissions. So why not have it here in the United States, where we have the best environmental controls of any country in the world?
Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy says the ruling was a horrible decision. He says it does one thing, outsources production to dictatorships and terrorist organizations, adding that the Willow Project would power America with 160,000 barrels a day, provide thousands of families supporting jobs, and greatly benefit the people of Alaska. ConocoPhillips says it will review the ruling and decide what to do next. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And the Biden administration is banning a common pesticide used on crops. It's a win for some environmentalists, but a major loss for some farmers. They've depended on it since the 1960s. NTD's Fizzles has the story.
The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, is blocking the use of chlorpyrifos, a common pesticide used on food, such as corn, soybeans, strawberries, broccoli, citrus fruits, and more. The agency says the ban is long overdue because of potential health concerns to children, farm workers, and all people. The National Pesticide Information Center says the chemical is not linked to cancer, but extended exposure can cause side effects in the nervous system. Kids exposed to the pesticide, according to some studies, have shown higher levels of hyperactivity or attention deficit disorders. Farmers who use the pesticide may be forced to find an alternative or suffer major crop losses due to the new law. When California banned the pesticide in 2019, the California Citrus Association said the health risks were exaggerated and the ban didn't represent the safety measures that were already in place. The New York Times said advocate groups estimate the new rule will cut the use of the pesticide by over 90%. The ban will take effect in 6 months. Fizzles, NTD News.
The U.S. Transportation Department says it will limit some flights from Chinese carriers to 40% capacity for 4 weeks. It comes after the Chinese regime imposed similar limits on 4 United Airlines flights. Gloria Sao reports.
The U.S. Transportation Department slapped limits on Chinese airlines following a similar move by Beijing. The order will limit U.S.-China flights on 4 different Chinese airlines to 40% capacity for at least a month. China told United Airlines earlier this month it would be imposing sanctions after 5 passengers who traveled from San Francisco to Shanghai allegedly tested positive for COVID-19. The U.S. government says China's circuit breaker policy violates the nation's air services agreement, placing, quote, undue culpability on carriers for travelers testing positive. They added that carriers have no means to independently verify positive test results alleged by Chinese authorities or determine where or when a traveler contracted the virus. United said it was pleased to see the U.S. taking action, quote, in pursuit of fairness in this important market. The Chinese embassy in Washington did not immediately comment. The 2 countries' agreement allows more than 100 weekly flights back and forth, although only a fraction of those are currently operating. The U.S. and China have sparred over flight services since the beginning of the pandemic. The latest limits come as many Chinese students head to the U.S. for the start of fall classes.
And the Cuban regime is further tightening control over social media. Those who post content that, according to authorities, damages the, quote, country's prestige will be deemed cyber terrorists. NTD's Orlean Richards has the story.
The Cuban Communist regime announced Decree 35 on Tuesday. It bans the spread of messages and content the regime considers offensive or that incite mobilizations or other acts that upset public order.
This model, Decree 35, will demand an adequate, respectful, ethical, and truthful use of these communication channels.
The regime claims this is to clamp down on misinformation. It also provides a channel for Cubans to inform authorities about potential law violations. But many citizens and international human rights activists are outraged over the move, saying it would further restrict Cubans' freedoms.
These new laws come to reinforce the prohibition that already exists and legalize things that were being done outside of legal framework, such as the cuts of the internet service, etc. It is a threat to the freedoms and the citizens' rights, which is why it has generated so much rejection among the population.
Part of the decree also orders the state telecom's monopoly to suspend services for users who have sent messages or content that violate the rules. Even human rights nonprofit Amnesty International is paying attention to the tightened control.
It is seeking to limit the space where people can access information freely. Not only the access, but distribute and exchange information. It will be up to the authorities to determine what is false information, and information that seeks to harm the government or against the constitutional precepts.
The Americas director at Amnesty International says this new decree formalizes digital repression, and the Cuban regime is once again seeking absolute control of a monopoly on internet access. Cuban officials have long argued that dialogue is permitted only within the revolution. The Cuban foreign minister wrote about the decree on Twitter, saying we have the right to exercise national sovereignty over cyberspace.
Still to come this evening. Mastercard says the magnetic strips on its credit and debit cards are reaching an expiration date and it's time for an update. And Facebook unveils a new app that could upgrade remote work. It combines virtual reality with virtual meetings. That and more after this short break.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? We're spending late nights and covering deep government corruption? Does it mean persevering over 20 years, even after 4 masked men set one of our printing presses on fire last year? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
Welcome back. Mastercard is getting a new look that's supposed to be more secure, and it'll make swiping plastic a thing of the past. The company is phasing out magnetic strips for its credit and debit cards in favor of a more secure embedded chip. The president of Mastercard's cyber department says cards with chips provide better protection for customers. The process will be gradual. Mastercard says magnetic strips will be optional for customers by 2024 and completely gone by 2033. And Chipotle is testing its first new protein made from alternative ingredients in 7 years. The restaurant chain is trying out a plant-based chorizo in Denver and Indianapolis. Chipotle says it's developed the meat alternative all on its own without the help of companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible. Their plant-based chorizo is made with a pea protein and different seasonings. The product is vegan and has 20 grams of protein per serving. No word on when Chipotle will add it to its menus nationwide. And Facebook is using virtual reality to upgrade online meetings. Today, the social media giant unveiled Horizon Workrooms. The virtual reality app simulates a conference room meeting and supports up to 50 people in one sitting. It works like most online meetings, but those who use the Oculus Quest 2 VR headset receive some special features. For instance, they can join up to 15 others in a virtual conference room represented by a customizable avatar and use virtual hands and fingers to gesture. The app is also free for those with the VR headset, but the headset is not cheap, retailing at about $300. Last month, Oculus recalled the face pads in its Quest 2 headset after reports of them causing skin irritation. And Kenya's tourism industry is trying to recover after the pandemic stopped global travel. But with the Delta variant, business is still struggling. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Chisel and hammer in hand, this artist carves out a design. From tribal figures to African wildlife, the finished results are popular keepsakes for tourists visiting Kenya. But since the pandemic hit, demand for these objects has plummeted.
In this business, we deal with tourists. Since the COVID-19 pandemic struck, tourists reduced completely, so we closed the shop and were laid off. Then in January, we were recalled, but our boss had to pay us half the salary.
Vaccines gave a glimmer of hope that the tourism industry could get back to business, but the Delta variant has put that in doubt. Simon Kabu is the manager of Bonfire Adventures Tours and Travel Company.
Before COVID, sometimes like over festive season, we used to dispatch big fleets, starting even from 300, 400 vehicles in one day, and having charters to different places here in Kenya and across.
But he says tourist numbers have dropped 80% since the pandemic. Kenya has been reliant on donations of vaccines. Johns Hopkins University says so far, the country has administered more than 2.1 million doses, and over 1.4% of its population is fully vaccinated. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
That's the latest business updates for today, but you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.